I woke up before the sun had fully broken through the curtains. The faint orange glow slipped between the fabric, slicing the darkness like a quiet accusation. Another Mother's Day. My 47th. I lay in bed for a moment listening. Silence. Not even the creak of Braden's door or the hallway floorboards. Just the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional gust of wind brushing against the windows. I used to think silence was peace. Now I know better. Silence is the sound of absence, of neglect dressed in civility. I pushed off the covers and reached for the old blue robe that still smelled faintly of lavender and dish soap. The slippers beside the bed were worn at the edges. I'd meant to replace them last year. Like I meant to repaint the hallway or fix the leak under the sink. I made a lot of promises to myself. Most of them expired quietly. Downstairs, the kitchen sat pristine, too pristine, everything in its place, like a museum of labor. The counter was wiped spotless, the kettle positioned at a perfect angle on the stove. Years ago, I used to joke that I'd die in this kitchen. Now, the joke tasted bitter. It wasn't just a kitchen, it was a confession. A space built around service. Every cup I rinsed, every pan I scrubbed, every casserole I baked said the same thing. You are what you give. I cracked eggs into a bowl, the motion mechanical. The pan hissed as I poured them in, and I stirred, watching the yolks disappear into the scramble. Toast popped up behind me. Butter spread. Coffee brewed, no cards, no flowers, no footsteps on the stairs. Braden didn't even know I was awake. When he finally did come down, it wasn't with celebration. No warm hug or sheepish grin. No Happy Mother's Day whispered with guilt. Just the soft thud of socks against tile and the flick of his phone screen lighting up his face. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the fridge and pulled out orange juice, taking a swig directly from the carton. I set his plate down on the table without a word. Scrambled eggs, 2 slices of toast, strawberry jam. He didn't say thank you. "Can you take care of the dishes?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, almost unsure of itself. He looked at the sink, then at me, his brow barely furrowed. "It's not a big deal." The words weren't said with malice. That might have hurt less. They were said with indifference, as if the labor of cleaning up after a breakfast he hadn't contributed to, on a day supposedly meant for me, was somehow insignificant. Like my request was a minor inconvenience in the larger narrative of his life. I nodded. I didn't argue. I just turned away and wiped down a counter that didn't need wiping. He sat, scrolling through his phone, chuckling now and then. A meme, maybe, or a TikTok video. I didn't ask. I used to ask. I used to lean in, try to connect. Those days were gone. It wasn't that Braden was cruel, not overtly. He never yelled, never cursed at me. But he didn't see me. Not really. He saw a fixture, a default, a soft body that made meals and offered tired smiles and paid utility bills without complaint. I'd blurred into the wallpaper of his life. And the worst part? I let it happen. The kitchen clock ticked too loudly in the silence that followed breakfast. He left his plate on the table. I stared at it for a full minute before picking it up and rinsing it myself. The dishwater was warm, almost soothing. I scrubbed like I always did, methodically, obsessively, until the ceramic gleamed. My hands moved on their own, familiar choreography. While I washed, I remembered my own mother. Tall, stern, unsmiling. She'd never celebrated Mother's Day either. Said it was sentimental nonsense. She believed sacrifice was the currency of womanhood. Her mantra: "Don't expect gratitude, do your duty." She called it strength. I call it silence. I used to believe I could rewrite that legacy. I thought if I gave enough, loved hard enough, sacrificed long enough, I could raise a son who would see me, who would appreciate me. I was wrong. The faucet dripped after I shut it off, echoing into the quiet. Braden had already retreated to his room. The door clicked shut. I could hear the low bass of music leaking through the walls. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. The grass needed cutting. A bird feeder hung crooked. The lilac bush Gordon had planted the year before he died was blooming in a riot of purple. That used to mean something. Now it just reminded me that even dead men could leave things behind. I touched the glass, cold under my fingertips. My reflection stared back. Tired eyes, lips pressed into a line, hair pulled back too tightly. I looked like my mother. I looked like someone waiting to be remembered. The clock chimed again, 10 o'clock, still no message, still no gesture, not even a lie to pacify me. I sat down at the table, the empty plate still wet from washing, and folded my hands in my lap. My mind drifted, not to what I wished he'd done, but to what I had stopped expecting long ago. There's a kind of grief in realizing you've become invisible, not because of age, not because of time, but because the people you love have learned to look past you. That night, the house was hushed, except for the clinking of utensils against a ceramic plate. I'd made lasagna, Braden's favorite. I hadn't planned to. My body moved out of habit, guided more by the calendar than my heart. He hadn't asked for it, hadn't thanked me either. He took his plate into the living room, plopped on the couch, and turned on the TV without a word. By 9, he was in his room. I stood in the hallway, frozen by a familiar ache, the feeling of being surrounded by walls and yet so utterly exposed. I didn't even realize I was eavesdropping until I heard my name. Nah, she's fine. Just being, dramatic. It's Mother's Day, so everything has to be about her, he said, laughing. She cried last year too, over some stupid card or whatever. The laughter on the other end muffled, but I caught the words clingy and overbearing. My lungs forgot how to work for a second. I hadn't known pain could feel like embarrassment, like shame, like being caught naked in the cold. I stood there, the hallway suddenly longer than I remembered, stretching out into a corridor of disappointments. I turned away, nearly tripping on the edge of the rug, and locked myself in the bathroom. It was the only room that still felt like mine. I closed the lid on the toilet and sat down, curling forward, my arms around my stomach like I was trying to hold myself together. The mirror loomed above the sink, its light too bright, too honest. I stared at my reflection. I looked like a woman who used to smile. Now I wore grief like foundation. Who am I anymore? I asked aloud. The question cracked in my throat, brittle and dry. The silence that followed was louder than any insult Braden had ever spoken. Because it wasn't just him. It never had been. Flashbacks came in pulses, like waves slamming into the back of my eyes. Gordon, years ago, at dinner. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's just one night. Braden at 12. Why can't you be fun like Dad? My mother. You wanted this life. Don't complain. My father. A real woman doesn't need praise. I saw myself at 30, crying in the laundry room after finding out Gordon had canceled my birthday dinner for a golf trip. Me at 38, begging him not to yell in front of Braden. Me at 42, alone in the hospital after a minor car accident, with no one answering their phones. I inhaled sharply, drowning in years of self-abandonment. The mirror offered no comfort. Just an echo of the woman I used to believe I might still be. Desperate for air, for anything to break the weight pressing into my chest, I reached for the top drawer in the vanity and pulled it open. Amid bandages and floss, my fingers brushed against a small digital recorder. I'd forgotten it was there. Delilah. I clicked play. Her voice emerged through the static like a ghost made of sunlight. Hey, honey. I just wanted to say I love you. You're not crazy. You're not too much. You're not invisible. If no one else says it today, I see you, Clara. You matter. I clutched the recorder to my chest and fell to the floor, curling into a sob so raw it tore through my ribs. She had died 2 years ago. Breast cancer. The only person who ever stood between me and the void of erasure. She had seen me, not as a mother or a wife, but as Clara. I don't know how long I stayed like that. My tears eventually dried. My breath steadied. And in the empty space she left behind, something else stirred. Resolve. I will matter, I whispered. If not to them, then to myself. It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. By the time I left the bathroom, Braden's door was shut. The house smelled faintly of garlic and burnt cheese. I walked down the hall to Gordon's old study, a room I had avoided since his funeral. The door creaked open. Dust blanketed everything. His desk sat like a monument to a man who never let me sit behind it. I opened drawers slowly, unsure what I was even looking for. Maybe something to burn. Maybe something to bury. In the bottom drawer, tucked behind an expired passport and a dog-eared copy of The Art of War, was a large manila envelope. My name was scribbled across the front in Gordon's angular handwriting. Clara. Only if something happens. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, a stack of documents, a joint savings account, $180,000. I blinked, checked again. The account had been opened 11 years ago. Our names both listed, though I never signed anything. No withdrawals. Interest accrued monthly. The bank branch still existed, just 2 towns over. There was a sticky note attached. Emergency use. For Braden, of course, for Braden. But it was my name on the paperwork, and Gordon was dead. I stood in the study, the envelope clutched to my chest, heart hammering so hard I could barely hear myself think. For Braden, after everything. 1,000 memories collided, him breaking my favorite vase, him refusing to drive me to a doctor's appointment, him telling his girlfriend I was just clingy. And me, always me, quietly forgiving, quietly forgetting. Not anymore. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine. Red, dry, the kind Gordon always said tasted too sour. I drank it slowly, staring at the envelope on the table. This wasn't about revenge. It was about resurrection. Mine. It didn't start with Braden, or even with Gordon. It started long before either of them, before the house, the marriage, the child, before I ever made a meal or folded a shirt or cried over an empty gesture. It started in a tiny brick house on Maple Ridge with lace doilies on the end tables and silence buried in the walls. My mother was a fortress, neat, unmoving, built from stern glances and thinly veiled disappointment. Her name was Ruth. She didn't smile often. When she did, it looked like someone trying on a mask they hadn't worn in years. Her love was conditional, transactional. A perfectly ironed shirt might earn a compliment. A good report card might be rewarded with silence instead of criticism. But emotions? Affection. Those were distractions, weaknesses. She believed women existed to make men's lives easier. Your job is to serve, she'd tell me, not with anger, but with certainty, like reciting the rules of physics. A good woman doesn't need to be asked. She just knows what's expected. My father, Dean, was barely a rumor. He was there, technically, though his absence often felt louder than his presence. He worked night shifts, came home drunk, or didn't come home at all. I stopped counting how many birthdays he missed. The one time I got sick and needed to go to the hospital, my mother walked me there herself, 4 blocks in the snow, and never once complained. She didn't ask where he was. Neither did I. By the time I was 16, I had memorized the playbook. Cook, clean, nod, agree. I was good at disappearing inside of service. That's what made Gordon so dangerous. He didn't seem like the others at first. He was attentive, charismatic, handsome in a polished kind of way. He bought me flowers, opened doors, remembered my favorite type of coffee. He made me feel chosen. For someone who had spent her life trying to be noticed, that kind of attention felt like salvation. We married when I was 22. He was 29, confident, already working in finance, already established. I dropped out of college after the wedding. "What's the point?" my mother said when I hesitated. "You landed a good man. Don't screw it up trying to be clever." At first, Gordon was gentle. Then gradually, kindness became currency. "Don't you think I deserve a quiet house after the day I've had?" "Why are you so sensitive? I'm just being honest." "You should be grateful I provide the life you have." His words slid into my brain like needles, subtle and frequent. Death by 1,000 rationalizations. I stopped correcting him, stopped arguing, stopped asking for anything at all. When Braden was born, I thought maybe everything would change. Maybe Gordon would soften. Maybe love would expand in the presence of something pure. It didn't. He treated Braden like an heir to a throne he hadn't earned yet. Took him golfing by 5. Taught him to shake hands, like a man, by 7. Told him never to cry, never to be weak like girls. By 12, Braden was already rolling his eyes when I spoke. "Mom, stop. You're being dramatic." "God, it's not a big deal. You're so emotional." I heard Gordon in every syllable, and I stayed silent. I told myself I was preserving peace. I told myself children need both parents. I told myself the lie so many women whisper in the dark. If I just try harder, it'll get better. Janet was the only one who ever challenged that silence. We grew up together. Next-door neighbors, same bus stop, same braces, same awkward middle school phase. But where I internalized my mother's doctrine, Janet rejected it. She went to college, studied psychology, and became a therapist. She wore bold lipstick and told the truth even when it made people squirm. We reconnected at 35 when Braden had just started high school and I was balancing PTA meetings with quiet panic attacks. She saw it immediately. "You're drowning, Clara." she said during one of our coffee meetups. I remember laughing it off. I'm fine. No, you're functional. That's different. And that boy of yours is already picking up your husband's worst habits. I should have listened. I didn't. Instead, I pulled away. I stopped returning her calls. I convinced myself she didn't understand, that she was judging me, that she wanted me to blow up my life and start over when I had no tools, no savings, no confidence. But she was right, and I knew it even then. Years passed. Gordon got sick, pancreatic cancer. The same man who barked orders from his leather recliner ended his days whispering apologies I didn't trust. Braden was 19 when he died. He cried, but only for himself, for the disruption. For the future, he thought his father was supposed to guarantee. I tried to reconnect with him then, tried to show up differently. But the gap between us was a chasm, and I didn't know how to build a bridge. Now, standing in a house too full of echoes and obligations, I realize I didn't just lose time. I lost myself. I traded voice for order, traded identity for safety, traded my entire being for a semblance of structure that never protected me at all. That night, after finding the envelope, I reached out to Janet for the first time in 6 years. Her voice on the other end of the phone didn't carry judgment, just quiet shock. Clara? I found something, I said. I think I'm ready to talk. There was a pause then. I never stopped hoping you would. The next morning, I dressed in jeans and a slate gray cardigan. Nothing flashy, nothing that would raise questions. I told Braden I had errands to run, and he didn't look up from his phone long enough to ask where. Perfect. The bank was only a 20-minute drive, but the journey felt longer. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The envelope sat on the passenger seat beside me, its contents rechecked, recounted, and reread a dozen times since last night. A joint account, my name, my legal access. And yet, I kept waiting for someone to tell me I was wrong, that I'd misunderstood, that someone like me didn't get to make choices like this without a man's signature attached. The bank building was unimpressive. Red brick, a navy awning, and a modest gold-lettered sign. Northward Federal. I stepped inside and was met with sterile air conditioning and the faint scent of ink and polished wood. A woman at the reception desk offered a polite smile. Can I help you? I'd like to speak to someone about a joint account, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. My name's Clara Whitmore. Within minutes, I was sitting across from a man in a crisp button-down and wire-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself as Mr. Halston, account manager, mid-50s, careful with his words. I handed him the envelope, my fingers trembling just slightly. He reviewed the paperwork, nodding slowly. Yes, this is all in order. It's a dormant account, no activity in over a decade, but it's joint, which means, Mrs. Whitmore, you have full legal access. I blinked. So I can withdraw from it? He looked up. Absolutely. This money has your name on it. You don't need permission from anyone. The words landed with a weight I didn't expect. I sat there for a moment, swallowing the lump in my throat. So much of my life had been structured around asking, around waiting, around needing someone else to allow me. But here now, I didn't need anyone's approval. I'd like to withdraw $40,000, I said, my voice clear and firm. Mr. Halston didn't flinch. He filled out the paperwork, offered a choice of check or transfer. I took a cashier's check and tucked it into my purse like it was a secret more sacred than anything I'd ever held. When I walked out of that bank, the air felt different, lighter, like it had made space for me. By the time I got home, Braden was gone. Work, probably. I didn't check. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe him one. I went upstairs and pulled out my old laptop, still slow but functional. I searched for cabins in northern Minnesota, secluded, quiet, available immediately. I found one by a lake surrounded by pines, 2 hours north. Private, with a fireplace and a screened porch, it looked nothing like my life, which was exactly why I chose it. I booked it under the name C. Monroe, my mother's maiden name. The irony didn't escape me. I wasn't running to become someone else. I was running to find the version of me that might have existed if she hadn't been born into duty. That night, I packed a small duffel bag, jeans, sweaters, hiking shoes, and the leather-bound journal Delilah gave me for my 40th birthday, still blank. I took the envelope too, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remember the moment everything shifted. At 5:15 a.m., just before dawn, I placed a folded note on the kitchen table. Braden, I'm safe. I'm not leaving forever. But I need air. Mom. Then I walked out the front door, got in the car, and didn't look back. The road stretched ahead like a question I hadn't dared to ask in years. What if I mattered? The cabin was better than the pictures. Rustic but clean, perched on a gentle slope with a view of the lake that shimmered like polished glass. I opened every window, breathed in the pine-laced wind, and sat on the porch in stunned silence. No demands, no door slamming, no one asking where their socks were or why the Wi-Fi was slow. Just stillness. For hours, I didn't do anything. I didn't make a list or cook or fold anything. I just sat. I existed. That evening, I lit the fireplace and poured myself a glass of wine. My phone buzzed, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. I hadn't disappeared. I was reclaiming. But the next day, when I finally checked my messages, my breath caught in my throat. 4 missed calls from Janet. 1 voicemail from my lawyer, Harlan Becker. Clara, I need you to call me back as soon as you can. It's about Braden. He's filed paperwork. He's attempting to claim power of attorney over your financial accounts. He's arguing that you're experiencing an emotional breakdown and maybe making irrational decisions. I sat down slowly, the phone still against my ear, every part of me going still. So this was how it started. Not with concern, not with a question, but with control. Braden wasn't looking for me because he was worried. He wasn't trying to help. He was trying to hold the reins. I stared out the window, the lake still calm. He had learned exactly what Gordon taught him. But this time, I wasn't going to be quiet. The silence here was different. It wasn't cold like the quiet back home. It didn't accuse or belittle. It didn't weigh on me like a wet coat I couldn't take off. It simply held me. The cabin creaked at night. The wind whistled through the trees in low, melancholic notes. Each morning, I woke to birdsong and fog drifting over the lake like a forgotten veil. And every morning I wrote. My journal, once a gift wrapped in guilt, became a confessional. No rules, no audience, just black ink and memory. Day 1. I don't know who I am without someone else to serve. It terrifies me. Day 2. I remember the day I dropped out of college. Gordon didn't even ask me to. I just knew it would make things easier. That flashback lingered all morning. I could still see my dorm room, walls covered in poetry clippings and Polaroids. I had wanted to major in literature, teach maybe, write, definitely. I was happiest surrounded by books. But then Gordon asked if I wanted to build something real together. And I said yes, like it was the only right answer. He gave me a ring. I gave up everything else. Sometimes, I wondered if my silence had been louder than any scream. That afternoon, while I was gathering firewood behind the cabin, a voice startled me. You're not from around here. I turned to see a woman, mid-60s, sharp-eyed, strong posture, silver hair pulled into a tight braid. She wore jeans tucked into worn boots and a flannel shirt buttoned all the way up. I'm Miriam, she said, extending a hand. Caretaker for the lodge. You must be C. Monroe. I nodded, feeling suddenly exposed as if she could see through my alias and straight into my past. Your firewood's stacked all wrong, she added. It'll smoke up your cabin. She didn't wait for permission, just began restacking the logs, quick and efficient. That was Miriam. No fuss, no small talk. But behind her briskness was a precision I came to respect. She knew how to build things that lasted. And slowly, without ever making me feel indebted, she began helping me rebuild myself. She taught me to light a fire properly, to walk the trail behind the cabin without getting turned around, to breathe when my chest got tight from thoughts that crept in uninvited. One afternoon we sat by the lake, our boots in the mud. I told her haltingly about Braden, about Gordon, about the decades I'd spent pretending peace was the same as love. She didn't offer platitudes, just said, you can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm and then wonder why you're always cold. Her words hung in the air like gospel. Each day, I wrote more. Day 6. I cooked pasta tonight, just for me. No one criticized how much garlic I used. Day 8. I took a walk in the rain without a destination. My jeans got soaked. I laughed anyway. Day 10. I bought a sweater in cobalt blue, my favorite color, before Gordon said it made me look washed out. It doesn't. It makes me feel electric. Bit by bit, the fog in my mind began to lift. I started to notice things I hadn't seen in years. The way the wind made the pine needles shimmer, the way the sunlight warmed the hardwood floors in the afternoon. How my face in the mirror looked softer when I wasn't bracing for disappointment. Then came the phone call. I hadn't spoken to Janet since the day I left. I dialed her number with trembling fingers, half expecting her to ignore it, to let me sit with the regret I'd carried for years. But she answered on the third ring. "Clara?" I exhaled. "I'm sorry." The silence on her end wasn't cold. It was surprised. Then came her voice, steady, familiar, unguarded. "About time." I laughed through a sob. We talked for hours. About Braden, about the power of invisibility, about women who disappear behind other people's needs until they become shadows in their own stories. Janet didn't tell me what to do. She reminded me what I could do. "You have the right to protect your future," she said. "It's not betrayal, it's survival." She connected me with a woman she knew, Ava March, a lawyer specializing in elder abuse and financial autonomy. Ava listened, asked smart questions, and agreed to review everything. "It's good you left when you did," Ava told me. "He's playing a longer game than you think." And with that, the final thread of guilt unraveled. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being emotional. I was protecting the only thing I had left, myself. That night, I sat by the fire Miriam had helped me build. I watched the flames dance, the logs crackle, the embers glow. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt becoming. The community center where the group met was nothing special. White walls, folding chairs, a burnt-out coffee pot in the corner. But the moment I stepped inside, it felt heavier than any church I'd ever walked into. Not because of judgment, but because the women in that room had learned how to hold pain without flinching. Janet had suggested I go. She said, "You don't have to speak. Just sit. Listen. Let yourself be seen." So I did. I sat in the back, hands folded, heart pounding as if every old wound in me feared exposure. There were maybe a dozen of us, all different ages, all dressed like we didn't want attention. But when one woman began to speak, her voice thin, almost embarrassed, something shifted. "My husband never hit me," she said, "but he didn't have to. He erased me in 1,000 other ways." Heads nodded, mine included. Another spoke. "I used to hide the good snacks so I'd have something just for me. That's how small I had to live." And another. "He'd always say I was too sensitive, like my feelings were an inconvenience." The words were familiar. Not just the content, but the cadence. The shame dressed up as self-blame. The way each woman apologized for taking up space, even as she tried to reclaim it. When it was my turn, I didn't plan to speak. But something inside me, a voice I hadn't trusted in years, pushed forward. "My name is Clara," I said quietly. "I left my house a week ago because I couldn't breathe in my own life anymore. I spent 27 years pretending to be okay. I was not okay." The tears came without permission, not from pain, but from recognition, from realizing I wasn't a glitch in the system. I was the system. And so were they. Afterward, a few women came up, offered hugs or quiet affirmations. No one tried to fix me. They just stood beside me. That was enough. Back at the cabin, something had shifted. The stillness wasn't just peaceful now, it was preparatory. I felt the urgency to act. I went into the bedroom closet and pulled out a dusty storage bin I'd packed years ago without thinking. Inside, Gordon's old love letters, birthday cards, printouts of spreadsheets he used to leave on my desk labeled household duties, receipts from expensive dinners he'd later call your birthday gift, even though I never got to order dessert. Every piece of it was laced with control masquerading as care. I carried the box to the fire pit outside, my hands steady. I didn't cry when I lit the first match. I watched as each letter curled, blackened, turned to ash. I didn't mourn. I exhaled. Later that night, I pulled out a legal pad and began drafting a new will. Braden would still inherit half of my estate, though estate sounded far grander than what I had. But the other half would go to the Harbor House Women's Shelter, a place Janet had once volunteered. A place for women like the ones in the group, like me. It wasn't about punishment. It was about intention. I wanted my legacy to reflect a woman who had finally chosen to matter. As I slid the papers into a folder to send to Ava, my lawyer, I felt calm. Not righteous, just clear. I would go back soon. Not because I missed home, but because I finally understood that home wasn't where I lost myself. It was where I would reclaim what was mine. But the calm didn't last. 2 days later, I was sorting through a filing cabinet Gordon had left in the cabin's storage closet. It was mostly junk: old insurance forms, car manuals, files labeled taxes in his scratchy pen. But behind a stack of envelopes was a slim folder marked Refi 2016. I opened it. My heart stopped. Second mortgage paperwork. My signature, sloppy, not mine, scrawled in ink. I flipped through the pages. The loan was taken out 8 years ago, without my knowledge, my name used, my credit leveraged, payments made sporadically, some months missed. I sat down on the floor, the folder shaking in my hands. How had I not known? Then came the email, an automatic credit alert I'd never unsubscribed from. Recent inquiry into account. Mortgage default risk flagged. It was real, not a ghost, not a misunderstanding. And someone else had known. I dug deeper, pulled old emails from Braden's financial aid paperwork. One from 3 years ago stood out. Your mother's credit line has been leveraged beyond standard limits, the email read, may impact future loan co-signing. Braden had forwarded it to himself, never said a word. He had known. He'd let me believe I was just forgetful. Let me think Gordon had handled everything. Let me clean up after a lie that he let rot for years. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood up and walked to the mirror. I stared at myself like I was waiting for some final verdict. Then I whispered the only words I had left. No more. I didn't tell Braden I was coming home. I didn't want to offer a warning, a heads up, or a window of time for him to compose his version of reality. I needed to see the truth, raw, unfiltered. I wanted to step into the house as it truly existed without me in it. When I pulled into the driveway just after noon, the front lawn was overgrown. A package sat weather-warped on the porch. The trash bins overflowed, lids open, bags spilling. The house looked exhausted, like it had been waiting for me to reclaim it or burn it down. I stepped inside. The smell hit first: stale takeout, unwashed clothes, beer. The living room was cluttered with dirty dishes, a pizza box on the floor, 2 overflowing laundry baskets by the stairs. The kitchen counter was buried in unopened mail, some of it mine. I dropped my bag by the door and walked through slowly. My footsteps felt louder than they should have, like they were echoing in a house that had long forgotten the sound of intention. Braden came downstairs in sweats and a wrinkled hoodie, earbuds in, eyes fixed on his phone. He didn't see me at first. When he finally looked up, he froze. Mom? I met his shock with silence. Just watched him process the sight of me standing there. Clean, composed, holding not guilt, but presence. His expression twisted. You just show up? After disappearing? I didn't flinch. You abandoned me, he said sharply. You didn't even say where you were going. No, I said, my voice even. I chose myself. He scoffed. You had a breakdown and ran away. Now you're back to play the victim? I walked past him into the kitchen, picked up a bill, held it up. You haven't paid the electric or the water. I've been stressed. I turned to face him fully. Braden, sit down. He hesitated, like a child caught doing something wrong, but too proud to admit it. But eventually he sat, arms crossed, jaw tight. I took the chair across from him. The kitchen table had always been a place where things were laid bare: report cards, arguments, birthday cakes. Now it was where I would finally speak without apology. I know about the mortgage, I said. I know Gordon forged my signature. I know you found out years ago and didn't tell me. His face tightened. I know about the joint account, the one with $180,000. You tried to claim power of attorney over me, said I was unstable. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. You don't get to twist this. You were acting crazy, he said, louder now. Running off, not answering calls, taking money. My money, I snapped, voice rising for the first time. My name, my account. My silence funded your comfort, Braden. Don't you dare talk to me about what's yours. He leaned back, sneering. Wow, so this is the real you. All bitter because I didn't worship you on Mother's Day? I stood, walked to the sink, took a breath. This isn't about a day. This is about years. You watched me become a ghost in this house. You knew what your father did. You learned from him. His expression flickered, just for a second. "You think I wanted to turn out like him?" he asked, quieter. "I think you didn't care enough not to." Silence filled the room like a rising tide. I walked back to the table and laid down an envelope. "This is from my attorney. I'm selling the house. The papers are drafted. You have 60 days. He blinked. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm ending the system that taught you I was disposable. You'll need to figure out where you belong next." His voice cracked. "You're my mother." "I was," I said gently, "but I was never allowed to be a person. Now I am." He pushed back from the table, pacing. "You're being vindictive. You don't care what happens to me." I looked at him, really looked. At the boy who once held my hand crossing the street, the teenager who stopped saying goodnight, the man who let my credit collapse while calling me dramatic. "I care," I said, "but I won't enable you anymore." He stopped pacing. The silence now was different. He looked tired, not angry, just lost. "You're serious," he said finally. "I'm free," I replied, and this time I meant it. The unraveling happened faster than I expected. 3 days after I gave Braden notice, he quit his job. No warning, no discussion, just walked out mid-shift and came home with a flurry of slammed doors and muttered curses. "You've destroyed everything!" he spat. "I was fine until you lost your damn mind." He said it like I hadn't been living in ruins for years. I didn't argue. I didn't even raise my voice. I stood there in the hallway, arms folded, watching the storm build in him like thunderclouds in slow motion. The fury wasn't new. What was new was that I no longer bent under it. "It broke me to watch him collapse," I would write in my journal later that night. But I refused to carry him anymore. He stopped doing dishes. He stopped showering. He slept through the afternoons, played video games into the early morning. I heard him on the phone with friends, calling me unstable, erratic. When that didn't rattle me, he escalated. He called my sister Kathy and spun his version of the story. By the end of the week, my phone was lighting up with messages from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. "Clara, you need help. You're being cruel. He's your son. He's grieving." They didn't ask what I had lived through. They didn't ask why I left or what I found when I came home. They heard his version, a fragile man abandoned by the mother who raised him. And still, I didn't waver. Janet reminded me, "People who benefit from your silence will always call your truth betrayal." Miriam added, "You're not here to convince them. You're here to protect your future." Their voices became my anchors. I leaned into the support I hadn't allowed myself for decades. Weekly calls with Ava, my attorney, helped me stay grounded in logistics. Miriam came by twice a week with tea and quiet solidarity. Janet helped me draft responses to family that were firm and unapologetic. And then, something unexpected began to bloom. I joined a mentorship program for young women transitioning out of difficult homes. It started as a favor to Janet. One evening Zoom call, nothing heavy, but by the end of that hour, something inside me had cracked open in the best way. I told my story. Not all of it, but enough. Enough for the girls on that call to see that survival wasn't a shameful thing. Enough for them to believe that healing wasn't a myth. Soon, it became weekly. I found myself laughing again, offering advice that I'd once needed, seeing the faces of these girls light up when they realized they weren't alone. One night, after a call, I sat at my desk and stared at my reflection in the laptop screen. I didn't look fragile. I looked alive. That same night, Braden sat alone in the dark kitchen. I heard him from the hallway, replaying an old voicemail from Gordon, the volume too loud, the words garbled. "You're the man of the house now. Make her proud." It was a cruel echo, a torch passed by someone who'd never truly carried it. I went to bed. 2 days later, I found out what he'd done. Janet sent me a link, a local online magazine, front-page article. "When Mothers Weaponize Emotion, a son's story of surviving narcissistic abuse." The byline was Trevor Michaels, a journalist Braden had gone to school with. The piece was slick, sharp, full of careful half-truths and damning generalizations. No names, but the descriptions were unmistakable. The woman in that story was unstable, erratic, manipulative. She hoarded money. She screamed over minor slights. She abandoned her son during a mental break. I stared at the screen for a long time, my hands cold. There were photos, too, of the house, of the front lawn, of a smiling Braden looking deliberately forlorn beside a caption, "Left behind." It wasn't just personal now, it was public. I clicked through the comments. Some were sympathetic, others were brutal. "This woman sounds unhinged. Typical boomer narcissism. Poor guy, I hope he gets help." I closed the laptop and sat in silence. It hurt. Not because they believed him, but because for so long I believed them. I had doubted my own memories, watered down my own pain, apologized for things I didn't do just to keep the peace. But not anymore. I picked up the phone and called Janet. "I saw it," she said before I could speak. "Are you okay?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm going to write a response. You sure?" "Yes," I said, "because silence built this, and silence won't save me now." The morning it went live, I already knew. There's a shift in the air when your name stops being just yours, when it becomes ammunition. "Abandoned by my mother. One man's story of emotional neglect." That was the headline, not from some fringe blog or private journal, but in a polished online magazine with a national readership. Braden had done what Gordon never dared, weaponized my motherhood for applause. The article painted me in the image of every overbearing, emotionally unstable woman the world already feared. A mother who smothered, manipulated, withheld, who disappeared when her son needed her most. It didn't mention the second mortgage or the forged signature or the years of invisibility, but it didn't have to. The photo of Braden, looking solemn in the shadow of our old porch, told the story the public wanted to believe. The comments echoed that narrative. "She sounds like a textbook narcissist. No wonder men have trust issues. Good on him for speaking out." And with every refresh, the article climbed in views, likes, shares. I didn't cry. I sat in my kitchen, that same kitchen I once scrubbed to a shine in hopes someone might say thank you, and I let the storm pass through me. I had been publicly condemned, not for what I did, but for daring to step away from what I didn't want to be anymore. That night, I opened a blank document. I didn't write in anger. I didn't defend. I didn't name him. I didn't have to. I titled it, "What It Took to Be Seen." I wrote for the women who had folded their lives into corners to make space for others, for the mothers who disappeared behind soccer schedules and emergency bills and burnt dinners, for the daughters raised to be agreeable instead of alive. I wrote about silence, about emotional labor, about how love, when expected but not reciprocated, curdles into obligation. I wrote about waking up one day and realizing your life belonged to everyone but you. I didn't dramatize. I didn't plead. I told the truth. It took me 4 hours and a bottle of water and one steady breath before I hit publish. I posted it on a quiet personal blog I'd used once, years ago, for recipes and holiday updates. I shared the link on my now dormant Facebook page. And then, I went for a walk. By the time I got home, it had already been shared 20 times. By midnight, 2,000. By the end of the week, it was on the front page of Medium, cited in think pieces, reposted on women's forums with comment sections full of confessions and thanks and whispered echoes of "Me Too." One message stood out, sent to my inbox by someone at Northwood University. "Ms. Whitmore, your essay moved our entire team. Would you consider speaking at our upcoming symposium on emotional labor and invisible abuse in family systems?" My breath caught. Not out of fear, but awe. For so long my voice had lived in margins. Now it was being called to the center. I accepted. The day of the event, I wore a dress I bought just for me. Navy blue with copper stitching, soft and firm in all the right places. Miriam sent a bouquet. Janet called before I stepped onto the stage. "You're not just speaking for yourself," she said. "You're giving language to the women who haven't found theirs yet." I stood in front of a modest crowd, professors, students, women my age, some older. A few men, surprisingly attentive. I didn't read my essay. I spoke from the place beneath it. "I'm not here to convince anyone of what I survived," I began. "I'm here to name what too often remains unnamed." I talked about Gordon, about my son, about the difference between protection and erasure, about how not all abuse leaves bruises. They told me I was lucky, that I had a good life, but they weren't in the room when I cried into dishwater because my birthday went unmentioned, or when my son called me clingy for asking if we could eat dinner together, or when I realized I hadn't bought anything for myself in 5 years that wasn't from the clearance aisle. I paused. And the most dangerous part? I believed them. I believed I was overreacting. I believed that being needed was the same as being loved. There was silence, then slow, affirming applause. Later, in the bathroom mirror, I looked at myself and thought, so this is what it means to be seen. Not pitied, not applauded, just known, and for the first time it was enough. The tide turned slowly and then all at once. It began in the comment sections, subtle, scattered contradictions to Braden's story. A woman from his sophomore psychology class wrote, "Funny, he told me his mom was emotionally distant, not clingy." Another commented, "He ghosted me after I shared something personal. Said I was too intense." Then came a thread, anonymous but precise, chronicling his manipulation in a past relationship, emotional baiting, gaslighting, jokes about women being liabilities. It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. Enough people saw it. Enough people whispered, maybe this story isn't what it seems. And mine, my words, my truth, kept circulating. Invitations came in slowly. Podcasts, bookstores, academic circles. Women messaged me privately, not to idolize, but to thank me for saying what they hadn't known they were allowed to say. Braden's expose lost traction. The magazine pulled it down quietly. No apology, no retraction. Just gone, like a lie being buried beneath shame. Meanwhile, I took action. I met with Ava and initiated a full financial separation. The second mortgage Gordon had forged, we disputed it. With Janet's help and old documentation, we filed for credit remediation. I refused to carry debts I didn't create. The house, legally mine, was listed on the market, cleaned, staged, lit with bright, intentional touches, new pillows, flowers from Miriam, a bowl of lemons in the kitchen window. A farewell, not just to a property, but to the years I lost there. Braden didn't fight it anymore. He was worn thin, but he was also still my son. So I gave him one final offering. 6 months of therapy, paid in full. No lectures, no conditions. Just a folder left on his nightstand with a note. If you want something different, you'll have to do something different. It wasn't forgiveness. It was mercy. The sale closed within 3 weeks. And instead of pocketing the full profit, I made a choice that surprised even myself. I created a fund in Delilah's name, the Whitmore Hope Initiative, a small but growing grant for single mothers escaping emotionally abusive households, not shelters, not temporary fixes, long-term solutions, legal aid, therapy stipends, down payments for independent housing. It was my legacy, my voice in action, a life rewritten not in bitterness, but in blueprints for someone else's survival. Then came the symposium. The university that had first invited me reached out again, this time for a larger event, a panel on resilience and matrilineal trauma. I was the closing speaker. That morning, I stood backstage wearing soft burgundy, Delilah's favorite color. I had pages in my hand, but I knew I wouldn't need them. The words were already stitched into my chest. As I walked into the lecture hall, something in the air shifted. A silence that felt expectant, not skeptical. Then I saw him. Braden. He was seated near the back, slouched, his hoodie pulled low. He didn't clap, didn't look away. I didn't falter. I spoke. I spoke about how generational pain disguises itself as tradition, how being a mother doesn't mean abandoning personhood, how sometimes survival means walking away from the very people you gave life to. I didn't mention his name. I didn't need to. After the talk, as people gathered their things, Braden approached the side stage. I saw him before he saw that I'd noticed. He stood there, unsure, older than I remembered. Not physically, but in the way a person carries the weight of self-inflicted damage. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice thin. I nodded and led him to a quiet hallway outside the auditorium. We stood there for a moment, mother and son, fractured and exposed. "I didn't think you'd actually show," I said. He shrugged. "I read your essay." I waited. "I didn't think you'd say it all out loud." I had to. He stared at the floor. "I don't know who I am without being mad at you." It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. "I don't know who I am when I'm not protecting you," I replied. He looked up. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just wanted to say I read it, and I think I finally understand what you were trying to survive." That was it. Not redemption, not repair, but recognition. I nodded. "Good." Then I turned and walked back toward the light, into a space that was finally mine. We didn't plan it. There was no calendar invite, no therapist's couch, no prepared speech. Just a quiet evening 2 days after the symposium. I was at a cafe near the university, nursing a lukewarm tea, when Braden walked in. He looked tired. Not just from lack of sleep, but from the kind of wear that sets into a person who's finally run out of stories to tell themselves. He didn't ask if he could sit. He just did. For a minute, neither of us said anything. The noise of the cafe filled the space between us, murmured conversations, clinking cups, the hum of a milk steamer, familiar distractions. "I hated you for a long time," he said suddenly, eyes locked on the table, "because you never fought back." I nodded once, slow and measured. "I know." He kept going. "I thought if you really loved me, you'd yell. You'd slam a door. You'd make it impossible to ignore you. But you just disappeared in plain sight all the time." I let that land. Let the weight of his truth meet mine. "I wasn't silent because I didn't care," I said. "I was surviving." He looked up, eyes rimmed red. "What does that even mean?" "It means I was so busy trying not to drown that I didn't notice I was handing you the same stones that were pulling me under." He wiped his nose with his sleeve, shame softening his features. "I thought you were weak." "I was tired." He swallowed hard. "You should have left him sooner." "I should have," I agreed. But I was raised to believe that staying made me strong. His face broke then, and with it, whatever armor he had left. I messed everything up. "You mirrored what you saw. I lied to people about you." "I know. I let Dad's voice live in my mouth even after he died." "I know." He gripped the edge of the table. "Can I undo this?" I leaned back slightly, studying the boy I had raised and the man he had become, both existing in conflict inside him. "Only if you choose to," I said. "This isn't about undoing. It's about rebuilding, from truth this time." He was quiet for a long time, then softly, "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," I said, "because that's not what this is." He looked confused, but I went on. "This is a reckoning, not a reconciliation. We both carry damage, but damage isn't destiny, not unless we keep handing it forward." He exhaled, shaky. "I don't know who I am without being angry." "You'll find out if you let yourself." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't cold. We sat like that until our drinks went cold and the cafe began closing for the night. When we stood, he looked at me like he wanted to say something else. An apology, a plea, a promise, but none came, and that was okay. There were no hugs, no soft music, just the sound of chairs being stacked and lights being dimmed. As I walked away, I didn't feel victory. I felt grace. Not the kind given to me, but the kind I had learned to give myself. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. The walls of my apartment are pale yellow, soft and warm like sunlight filtered through morning tea. They're not magazine perfect. There's chipped paint near the baseboards and a stubborn window that sticks every time it rains. But they are mine. 1 year. That's how long it's been since I walked away from the life I had spent decades building. And decades more surviving. 1 year since I stopped being a silent witness to my own erasure. The space I live in now is smaller, but it holds more of me than the 2-story house ever did. There's a bookshelf with titles I picked for no one but myself. A cobalt blue throw blanket, yes, that blue, that lives on the back of my couch. A kitchen drawer that holds nothing but new pens, sticky notes, and matches for the candles I light every night after dinner. My life is simple but not quiet. Not anymore. 3 days a week I lead workshops on emotional literacy. I work with women of all ages, from community centers to university lounges, guiding them through the vocabulary of pain, boundaries, self-trust. We write letters we don't have to send. We name things we were taught to bury. We share stories, not because they're tidy, but because they're real. When I tell them my name, I don't qualify it with mother or wife or widow. I am Clara. That is enough. Today is Mother's Day. I made myself pancakes, just 2. Ate them slowly with strawberries and whipped cream, the kind I never bought before because it was too much fuss. I played a Nina Simone record. I danced barefoot on the hardwood floor. I lit a candle for Delilah, for Miriam, for every version of myself I had to lose in order to find this one. And then I checked the mail. Tucked between a grocery flyer and a dental reminder was a plain white envelope, no return address. I knew the handwriting immediately. Inside, a simple card. Happy Mother's Day. I'm learning. Braden. I stood by the kitchen counter for a moment, holding the card in both hands. I smiled. Not a weak, trembling smile. Not the kind that hopes for something more. Just a steady one. Clean, clear. I didn't cry, because I no longer measure love by apology, because I understand now that a single act of recognition doesn't erase a history, but it can begin a new page. I placed the card in the drawer beside the pens. As the sun dipped below the apartment buildings across the street, I made tea and opened my notebook, the same one I started in the cabin. On the last page, I wrote, I lost my role to find myself. Sometimes, motherhood ends so womanhood can begin. And I meant every word. If you've ever questioned whether silence was strength or love was just survival in disguise, this story was written with you in mind. Reclaim your name. Rethink your inheritance. Because healing isn't just personal, it's generational. And sometimes, the most radical thing a woman can do is become visible to herself.